Welcome back.
Hey, everybody. Hey, how's it going? Hey, Spencer. Hey, Mark.
Welcome. Hey.
Howdy.
We're at the point now where it's just like, hey, good morning, good morning.
Good morning.
How are you? Good morning,
Good
how are
morning,
you?
sir.
Good. Okay,
Sir.
we can get into it now.
All right.
So, Mark chapter 10, that's where we were at this past Sunday. Let's start with highlights, as always.
Yeah.
I'd actually like to go first. I'd like to go first on that
Do
one.
it.
Just do it.
What? I thought you just said you would like to go first.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Okay. No, I think you knocked it out of the park. Again, we had another 50-verser where just story after story after
Was that
story.
less than 40 minutes?
I don't know. I
feel like it was
think
close.
you were there.
Gosh.
It was a lot.
I wouldn't want to imply.
bad.
I wouldn't want to imply I was timing you, so I can't tell you.
Yeah.
No, I think I really enjoyed the continual pressure that Jesus adds to who is important in your eyes. And when you were talking about marriage and you were talking about the children and then even the rich young ruler, like not young ruler, but the rich guy, and then Bartimaeus, like there's these people and these relationships that we're again forced to reckon with when it comes to what do I value in life versus what God values in life. Like I love how you hit the divorce side of stuff. Like he values when you enter into deep relationship. He values and I love how you said it, the children genuinely from birth to adulthood, like you're useless.
Yeah.
You're useless.
I mean,
and him calling that out and then you being like, you know, Jesus says, yeah, the children are, and we're like, yeah, of course the children are. But then they're like, no, the children aren't. Why are you talking about this kind of thing? I like how you did that.
Because we don't understand that culture.
Yep.
Yeah.
Especially in ancient culture like that, because it's not that way it's not that way in Israel today. It's not that way in. So
right.
I mean, that's a different,
Ancient
that's
versus
such
modern,
a
really. Yeah.
difficult culture to grasp.
Well, even the divorce stuff is mainly focused on the woman side of stuff.
The thing I like about the children, for me, every time that he shows interest in the kids, is I revert back to the thought that God is Father. So if we were in their culture, God as Father wouldn't be as powerful to us, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just like people who have had bad fathers struggle with calling God Father, right?
Yeah.
And we know there are those cases.
Sure.
But seeing him, Jesus interacting with children, and then putting together that we're the children, and he as the Father is receiving us like Jesus receives the children, and for him that goes on into our adulthood. We're still his children in adulthood. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
To us, we're 61, right?
Yeah.
But to him, we're still his child. I mean,
Absolutely.
when he's infinite.
Yeah.
So, like, I'm getting this new lesson now as a grandparent, correct? And she's, as a matter of fact, she's coming to the house today. So, but, like, there's almost no wrong she can do.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? I mean, if she knocks something over by accident, it's an accident. I mean, there's almost...
Is that what you said when your kids did it?
No. No. Don't bring them to the podcast, please. But what I'm saying is there's almost no wrong she can do. If she falls, you know, no one looks at a baby that falls and says, you're an idiot, you'll never get this. You know, like a works mindset. Everybody's like, oh, how cute. You're going to do it. You're going to get it someday.
getting there.
You know what I mean?
Wow.
And so, I mean, you think about, put that back into our religious performance. We beat ourselves up when we mess up in our religious performance. But what if he looks at us and he's like, you're going to get it. Just keep trying. You're going to get it. You know what I mean? Not striving like for works, but meaning like the more you live this life, you're going to get it. It's going to flow out of you.
Yeah, and it's not even about the end result. Like,
Yeah.
I think your illustration still works perfectly because he's not saying you're going to get it, like, hurry up and do it. It's like, it's the process.
Yeah.
Like, you don't watch a baby learn to walk because you're like, figure out how to walk. I'm tired of well, I do. But Jenny doesn't.
Come on,
Jenny
man.
doesn't. Levi's heavy, though. So, but it's not about, it's the journey. Like, it's the like, oh, it's going to be so exciting when he does learn how to do it. Like, oh, it's going to be fun. Then when he does learn how to do it, he gets to learn how to run, and then we get to run together, and we get to, it's the journey of it.
And you look at those as delightful milestones rather than works you've achieved.
Yeah.
Like,
Yes.
hey, yeah, now we can, because literally when she couldn't talk and couldn't play compared to now, I mean, it's a world of difference. And so those aren't works. Those are like, oh my gosh, this is wonderful. Look how much more our relationship is as you move into this experience.
Babies are for grandmas, toddlers are for grandpas. You know, it's like
Amen,
you know,
brother.
that's kind of how I've always thought of it. Is like Like even my dad is super sweet with Levi, but with Jacob, he's
ready to play.
Plays with him and throws the ball and like let's shoot basketball. Same with Jenny's dad, same exact way. Like, let's go hit golf balls with Levi. I mean, they'll hold him but it's like
it's not that they don't love him.
Yeah, you ready to go kick a ball?
But
I think what's interesting is like Friday we had our small group and our conversation actually led to a lot of the stuff that I ended up preaching about. So I was kind of laughing internally at like, oh, good one, God. Like, really line that up. Like,
don't you love how he does that?
And so that was one of the things we talked about is like our values. And I said, at some point as a family, you have to decide what your values are going to be. Like, you just have to decide. You have to say, like, am I going to be a travel ball family in spite the other things? Whatever. Not just church, but family value, whatever. Or are you going to have to draw a line somewhere and say, and I talked about that kind of tongue-in-cheek a little bit, but everyone's signs that say, generalizing a little bit, but like, as for me and my house, I'm going to worship the Lord according to that scripture. But it's like, but do you really believe that?
Yeah.
Like, it's cute to have it on your wall, but like, are you really going to believe that? Or are you going to do everything you want to do and not follow through with that and just have it on your wall because you want people to know that you associate with Christianity? And that's something I'm struggling with having a 3-year-old and a 7-month-old is like, I was talking to a guy actually recently that said, do you know when kids first can start to understand spiritual concepts? You want to take a guess at age?
It's got to be...
No idea where he got this from. I'm just trusting him.
It's got to be nursery age. I'm going to guess 3, 4.
18 months.
Wow.
He says when they can start understanding spiritual concepts. Now, I don't think he means they start understanding eschatology, but I think he means they're understanding...
There are churches that read the Bible to kids in the crib.
Well, and we've read to Jacob. I mean, I read Jacob all the time. He wants to read the Bible, but he'd grab my study Bible and like read this, and I read 4 words, and he's already in the other room like, I'm ready to do something else. So, but it's funny. But I think it's one of those things that even now I'm like, I'm not even close to travel ball. We're just starting T-ball. But even now I'm like, what is our family values? Is it family dinner? Like what do we value as a family, and what does Christ call us to value? And this chapter really kind of reminds us of that. It's like, well, what are you going to do?
On a bizarre note, let me throw a quick illustration on that. I read the story of a guy who had gone to church up until age 4, drifted away and never went near it again, and basically just considered himself an agnostic. Becomes a POW in Vietnam, and the verses he learned by age 4 start coming back to him in his mind in that prison.
Yeah.
And he comes back to a relationship with God in his prison state. And he and other prisoners are sharing their verses they know. And he since coming back and writing the book, he's like, we butchered a bunch of them. But this is what we, this is how we can get it out.
The Spirit reveals what you need, man.
So like even now, our preschool, here are kids 2 through 5. And they're hearing these Bible verses. It's completely possible some of them will never go to a church again.
Yeah, including narrative. I mean, just the narrative. Like Jacob knows the Jonah and the fish. He doesn't know Jonah. Well, he kind of does because my brother's name is Jonah, so it's a little more personal for him. But he keeps saying the big fish, read the big fish, and he knows the page.
Yeah, and
he'll remember. Like he'll have me flip through the pages to pick a Bible story, and he'll almost always stop it at the fish because he remembers that story. Yeah. Is he going to remember the quotes?
See how sweet you think that is?
Yeah.
That's how sweet God thinks it is when you get one.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's why I like the children's stories.
Yeah.
Well, I think that, too, it's like Jesus continues to put in perspective what's the most important, not even stage of life, but like what are the most important things? And we value our independent, self-sufficient, high-status lives. Like I'd say between 30 and 50, where we're cranking out. We might have a family, but we're focused on what we're doing, where we're going. We're out of this like I don't have this respect from kid to teenager, even into the 20s as I'm growing. I'm not necessarily insignificant as when I get into retirement age and I'm not in the workforce anymore, but we really prioritize those 20 years of just crank and grind.
Have you ever heard that teaching of the 5 values contrary to the spiritual value of your identity that Micah loves to talk about? That most people's value is either power and control, looks, wealth, status, and achievement.
Wow.
And so if something attacks that, you know what I mean? Like if my neighbor achieves more than me, or if my friend has more money than me, or if his wife looks at the other women in the group and thinks one of them's prettier than her. I mean, those are the ones, and that's what you're describing.
Absolutely. And he keeps on putting this like what's most important? The hardest relationship you will have on this earth is one with one other person in marriage. The insignificance of you don't offer anything to society as a widow or a elderly or a child. Like, he hits these moments that the kingdom of God is in the insignificant, and we fight that so much. Because we want to offer whatever it is that we can to this world. We want to offer it for our sake. But then when we become Christians, I like to describe it. I might have said it here too. Like imagine there's this massive mountain of hay. Like, you have just a gigantic hill of hay, and you have this one piece of straw. And we want so badly, even just to put our one piece on this mountain, just to say, I did something. I did it. Like, I did something. And the Lord continually is just like, come to me as this child, because you're insignificant. I was listening to something where they were just like, man, when you realize your insignificance and your smallness in the world and the universe, it's actually one of the best graces. If you frame it in the perspective of what it is, of just like, we don't offer anything. And Jesus continues to sit here, which at the end of the chapter, what happens? James and John are like, we are significant. We are 100% significant.
The losing team going for the MVP.
Well, and to put on an exclamation point, what you just said, and then get to James and John, literally, you don't matter except because Jesus says you matter.
Yeah.
Because he created you.
So with
we're
that thought,
totally
I'm
insignificant.
going to tell you the underlying thing that always comes to me in that divorce passage. So I put it together with the Matthew one, where he says God hates divorce, right? Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, as a church, we've wounded people. And so please, we don't mean it to wound you. God is loving and forgiving.
Yes.
That's why I closed the marriage part with that, because I was like, man, I don't want
the underlying thought there is, as you pointed out, the woman has no rights. She's trapped in this, right? But the other thing is, when you realize the woman can't divorce, only the man can. And then when you put that in a spiritual significance, who is your groom as a bride of Christ? It's Jesus. So we spend an awful lot of time thinking about what if we divorce him, when in a spiritual significance, is that possible? Because in the Jewish culture of that day, the woman couldn't divorce. And the very groom that we call our groom, our heavenly groom, has made it clear he ain't divorcing. I mean, if you read the Malachi thing, it says it puts violence on my garments. So he doesn't want to stain his own garments. He doesn't want to cut us off. That's why I wrote Hosea. So I always read that divorce passage and think, and in this, you see how bad this is for the woman. But out of that, I see what it means about my groom. He's the only one that can divorce me, and he doesn't. My spiritual groom.
And I like how you put that, Micah, and you close that up of like, divorce is a product of our broken culture and broken world. I mean, it's Christian, non-Christian, 50-50 shot right now is the stat. Like 50% of even faith-based marriages come to an end. And it's not that there's this shame that's overwhelming, that's you read this passage and it's just like, dang it, I went through this, I'm unlovable and all this stuff. But I mean, just like sin, it's anybody is in Christ. There's no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus. And even walking through, if that was your story, I came from a family of divorce. Like, even sin is something God uses to point us back, to recognize that's not it. And even walking through something like the brokenness of a marriage, like the Lord wants to take that and use it and say, that's not how it is. Sure, let's call a spade. That's not how this is supposed to be. But taking that and learning from, okay, what is my true marriage, my true relationship? Do I know that even though I walk through this split, the split here is never going to happen.
Not going to happen.
Never going to happen. And so if I do walk into another relationship, or the Lord calls me to just walk in singleness for the rest of my life, I'm learning through what the Lord calls redemption. And I'm learning through, okay, what does it really mean if this is the brokenness and fracture? And I think the enemy loves to take that, wrap us in shame, and be like, you're unlovable, you're the worst, you'll never be anything to the Lord. You might as well just call it quits and go survive on your own kind of thing. Versus, okay, what have I learned from this? Who is the Lord still? And how do I continue to walk in redemption and restoration? Because every second we have to breathe is another day to come back to the Lord. It's another second to come back to the Lord.
By the way, quick shout out to married couples. According to Barna, I think the I think it's 4% is the divorce rate for couples that pray together. Only
Shoot.
4% of couples that pray together divorce.
So pray together.
Yeah.
Every
Amen.
What? No, I'm just kidding. All right. So,
James and John.
dude, I just want to put in a formal request that we start doing before I preach the podcast before. Because I'm sitting here going like, dude, I feel like I would have preached a different sermon if I could have heard some of this stuff beforehand.
Now you feel like now you know what I feel like after I do mine.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
So James and John, man, that I didn't really get to this too much. Get to this too much. But and I almost did it again right after. Again. Shut up. All right. So yeah, but I just love that the NLT, what it says in verse 42. So Jesus called them together and said, "You know that the rulers in this world lord it over their people, and officials flaunt authority over those under them," in verse 43. "But among you, it will be different." Oh, man, I love that mentality and the description in the NLT. And I didn't read it in the NIV beforehand, but I love that idea of like Jesus is really exposing, as he already has been, and he has his whole ministry, the difference in authority of the world versus his authority.
Yes.
And he is really painting this picture very clearly. But you know that the rulers of this fleshly world, they do it this way. But with me and the world I'm bringing, it's going to be different. In fact, I don't know what the Greek word is here, but my guess is the word different is something like opposite. Like it's going to be the flip of. Like it's not just like it's kind of different, like it's kind of over here like a cousin. No, it's different. Like it's not related.
I just so happen to have that chapter pulled up.
Pull that up and tell me what that
42
Greek word is. A good preacher would have looked up the Greek word ahead of time. But it makes me wonder if the connotation of the Greek word there is not like extremely like strong. Like it's different.
It's different.
It's different. But while you're looking, so yeah, and I love the idea, man. It's been my calling card, and this is when I was even works-based for so long, and it's a really easy calling card to have when you're works-based. It's to put others before you because you're doing work, right? And so, but man, it really just has always stuck with me that even the Son of Man came to serve and not be served.
Right.
And man, every time I have a moment where I can choose to serve or not to serve, I swear that is just like I close my eyes and I can see that verse. Because it's just like in a moment where I can choose to be service or selfish. And I really wrestle with that still now. People talking about like protecting your time and being willing to say no. I'm like, man, I just don't know if like yeah, Jesus protected his time when he went to pray with the Lord. But other than that, man, like he is pretty giving.
Yes.
And so, man, I struggle with that a lot. And I just wonder, man, is us talking about protecting our time and whatever, is that not just our own justification of what we want? Or do we really believe that? Like, what time are you protecting? Is it your time for me to play video games, or is it my time with the Lord? You know, what's the difference? And I'm not saying there's no time for rest or whatever.
Yeah.
But I just often, my brain often thinks like, yeah, am I being selfish, or am I justifying like my own desires, or am I actually needing that rest? You know?
Right. I think
there's a balance there.
Right.
Obviously.
I think too, there's the struggle that, you know, with it's like anything. Satan can use anything.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So busyness, whatever.
You're presented with an opportunity to serve, and Satan can try and pull you away just to not serve.
Yeah.
And then if you say, like, it's like almost like a yes and no, cause and effect kind of chart. Like, if you say no, bang, you don't do it. If you say yes, here's 3 options of what happens when you say yes. Satan could lead you to say yes and then no, and then it's like there's more options. And I think we do get hung up on that idea of, am I just supposed to run myself dry? Am I just supposed to continue? Like, for the Son of Man came to serve, like, absolutely. And I think the idea of service really does come back down to who is serving. Is it Jesus in you, or is it you? And why are you serving too? Am I serving?
Yes, motive matters.
Am I serving people, or am I serving the kingdom of God?
I think motive matters is part of what comes out in that passage of James and John. Like,
yes,
you want to be first. You want to sit by my right, my left. Like, what is your motive for doing what you're doing?
That's right.
And then that's when he says, you know, whoever's going to be great among you will be the one who is servant.
Absolutely. And I think that's a trap that the enemy uses, because there is like this compassion thing, and there is the throwing, the temptation to be like, you didn't help that person out, you're the worst. And it kind of, for me, it comes back to, am I the one who's controlling the world and the situations of everybody, or is the Lord? And that's where spending time with God truly is like, hey, if I can help out, great, I will help out. If I feel the Lord's like, hey, I really want you to help out with this person, and that comes with getting to know his voice, getting to know those things. But I think often too, it's like the temptation is to have such a heart and full of compassion, which is a good thing, but then to lean into that even on an unhealthy standpoint where it's like, then I start getting worried that I have to control people's lives. I have to be the superior. And it's just like, if I say no to helping out with this because of XYZ reason, do I still trust that the Lord's going to help that person through somebody else? Like,
I think it's a struggle for all Christians, but I do think it's worse for ministers, right? I think the book, The Tyranny of the Urgent, helps put it in perspective.
Ruthless elimination
but also,
of hurry as well.
You kind of have to remind yourself.
Yeah, what they said.
Jesus walked away from crowds of sick people. Jesus walked away from crowds of needy people.
And
Jesus goes to the pool and heals one guy.
person. That's it. He would heal just specific people with all of these people. Like, dude, I'm here to.
Yeah.
Could you imagine the one in the crowd of people? It's just like,
well, it's like, me. I don't know if this is a biblical recording, but it's in like The Chosen. I don't know if you've got to this part where little James, the one that has a cripple, it asks him, like, why not me?
Oh, I haven't
That's a
seen
scene,
that part
dude.
yet. But
man, whew.
Oh, hold it. Is it that he has the one that has the disease and it bothers his hands?
No, it's the guy with
the guy at the
walking
pool.
stick.
Okay, I haven't seen that one.
Simon's,
No, I've seen the one.
No, I'm talking about the disciple, little James. He's the one with the walking stick. There's a moment where he and Jesus have a conversation where he's like, "Well, you're healing everybody else."
Yeah,
that was good.
And so that's a really, really good scene. But that
it was like The Chosen's adaptation of a presentation of that scenario.
Yeah,
which I think.
By the way, any of these adaptations, I love that part where Jesus washes the feet. Because, dude, that is a servant thing.
Yeah. Well, I found the word. It was heteros. And so it basically is very closely aligned with the word different. So it's not as necessarily strong of a connotation of opposite, but it's other, different, or another. So, I mean, it is an indication of like going... Instead of it almost being like a totally opposing thought, it's like as if there's a fork in the road and they're opposite ways. Yeah. So it's like you're going this way, your mindset is this way, and this is going this way.
So I was looking at Blue Letter Bible, but it reads, it gives you the Greek words based on the NIV or the King James.
Yeah. So, and it's not thus with you, I think is how he says it.
Shall it not be among you?
Yeah. So it comes from like an adverb. It all comes back from that heteros. But either way, I just find that passage, man, it's just like. And hearing what you are saying, man, I mean, you're absolutely right. There is, but I think that the element, kind of what I'm getting at, is being more in tune with the Spirit and listening to, is it about me that I'm not doing it, or is it the Spirit's telling me to rest? You know, and I think that's coming from a workspace. It was very, and I struggle with that part. You know, my default reaction is like, well, I'm on staff. Someone asked me to do it. I better do it. You know, that kind of thought, and. I'm on staff at a church because I love doing it. Yeah, so if I didn't, I would not be here. But so it's not that it's like a burden or like it's not me saying like don't ask me to do stuff for you, but because I like it. But there's always that. Now I've got wife and 2 kids, and you know but there's a balance, like you said. And he goes to the pool and heals one person when there's hundreds racing for that water. So, but yeah, you know, I think the whole chapter leads us to kind of this big transition in the book of Mark and his recording.
We're about to step into.
Speaking of that value thing, the last one, blind Bartimaeus. I was looking it up. Because it says, you know, son of Timaeus, right? So I was like, well, okay, what does that mean? So blind Bartimaeus is son of highly praised. So again, here you're back to your point. You know, here's the crowd seeing this guy of no value. And his name even means son of highly praised. Like even his name is indicating you have value. And Jesus, you know, sees value in him and does the healing. It's back to that counterculture. This whole chapter is like how counterculture Jesus is.
Yeah. Yeah. And I find it interesting. I think it just kind of dawned on me while I was preaching, but literally it's so interesting how opposite our culture is now from the ancient Jewish culture. And yet everything he taught that was opposing to their culture is still opposing to our culture.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's like you have these two cultures, Jesus is and ancient Jewish, they're opposites. We're opposite, and yet still somehow opposite from how he says to be. It's like, how could there be three opposites?
Yeah, literally.
And it's just like so interesting. But Bartimaeus, I love that indication, what he says, son of David. I mean, this is a very, to us, you're like, oh, that's cool. He remembers David. This is him calling him king, right? He is saying king.
Yes.
He is saying the Messiah. He is saying the one who would come. I mean, he's answering prophecies that the Pharisees know the words of, and this man probably just heard stories of, but yet he knows it. It's in his heart. And he says, have mercy on me. And that's I almost wonder if Jesus knew he was there and was like that. He knew that was going to happen and was waiting on those words before he turned and focused, like, yes, your heart is right.
Back
you
to
get
the
my culture.
That's right.
Yeah, and he's insignificant in the streets. People are telling him to be quiet, and I love, kind of how it closes, and Spencer's kind of alluded to this now for several weeks. The first, 10 chapters are this long stretched out time, and the last 6 chapters are a week, right? Just like a week. And so you've got this moment where you almost have, it's almost like a dun, dun, dun moment of Mark going, and Bartimaeus followed him. And then you're like, ooh. It's a kind of a cliffhanger. You're like, what's going to happen next? And this is where we just transition.
What is going to happen next?
This is where we just transition.
Because we're getting into Mark 11 this coming week, which is Palm Sunday. And Jesus is going to... So Mark 11 through 16...
It's not really Palm Sunday here.
Not yet. We still have a couple weeks.
Well, that's according to the Gregorian calendar.
That's
so,
true.
No, I'm just kidding.
But Mark, you're going to be getting into Palm Sunday and talk about
There will be
that.
obscure Jewish references.
So many of them. But everything from here on out takes place within 7 days.
Yeah.
And then you get this small little snippet at the end of 16, which is like 40 days later. So it's going to be down. But that last bit of what we're looking forward to is Bartimaeus is like, I want to follow you. And then now you start seeing everybody like start leaving him. Because Jesus' teachings, they're going to start getting tougher, and they're going to really start
betrayal.
hitting home.
You get
all of it,
denial, and
So
Jesus doesn't follow a church growth model. For sure.
He doesn't.
He does the opposite.
Like John 6, where he talks about bread of life, and it says people leave him. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The church growth model would be like, hey, come back.
No.
I didn't
We're
mean
just
it that
kidding.
hard.
Yeah.
But all
Just
that being
kidding.
said, we're excited to hop into it as we're heading up to Easter. No pun intended, because Jesus is also heading up to Jerusalem. So
As you
we'll
said,
see you all
3,500 feet.
3,500 feet.
We'll see you all this coming Sunday for Mark chapter 11.
Your love, there's nothing you can do about it.
Take care.
See ya.